At the end of the day, the biggest problems with these HOAs, the bad HOAs that we harp upon, is just not abiding by the contractual obligations that are in front of them. It's as simple as that. They have ulterior motives, or there is just an ignorance, right? And you always see this. You look at the CC&Rs. CC&Rs are very clear. Davis-Sterling Act is very clear. Fiduciary obligation, right? Standard of care is very clear. And the individuals that step into these roles just don't care, or
ignorant.
Ignorant, yeah, exactly. I'm Luke Carlson, and for almost 2 decades, my law firm, LS Carlson Law, has been at the forefront of defending homeowners against overreaching HOAs. We're not just leading the charge, we've created the go-to playbook on how to fight back effectively. Join us as we delve into the world of HOA disputes, sharing insights from our extensive experience and landmark victories. Throughout this podcast, we'll bring you in-depth interviews, demystify complex legal principles, and provide practical tips to safeguard your rights. While the information provided shouldn't be taken as legal advice, our aim is to empower you with the knowledge, strategies, and real-life success stories needed to navigate and overcome the challenges posed by overreaching HOAs. Hi, Luke Carlson of LS Carlson Law and host of Bad HOA. I have my producer here, Marty. Welcome back.
Hello there. Good to see you.
Good to see you. We have a very exciting show because, as I see it, we're going origin story.
Hey, if I've learned anything about movies, is that you have to have a good origin story for it to pop.
Yeah, and you and I were talking about this before the show, and I think this makes a lot of sense. And it's historically been one of those things, which is, where did these HOAs come from?
Yeah, I think that's a big, when so many people go in there and they say, I don't want my HOA, how do I get in this mess? I mean, what are they there for? All the fun stuff. I feel like we need to lay the foundation for them. That way they can kind of see the arc and where it's going and what they need to do in order to resolve some of these disputes.
Yeah, exactly. Because in HOA, even though it seems like this, it wasn't always there. It had to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So, from my perspective, it's very helpful to understand where they came from, how were they designed, what was the utility of them originally, and really what purpose do they serve? And then I think it helps frame it out down the road. Once they're functioning, right? Once they're in operation, you now have some context.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we start. We start with the origin story of HOAs.
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right, so let's back up. Let's look at, first and foremost, these communities, and typically it's a developer. The developer comes in and buys a very large piece of land.
Okay.
And what's happened over time is the cities have seen these developers come in and really like the idea that the developer is or can take over some of the responsibilities of the city, right? So it's almost a reallocation of cost. So what happened was a lot of these cities became very bullish on incentivizing developers to create associations.
Association, is it like roads and infrastructure?
Yeah, because you're looking at maintenance, and the city historically had to maintain the streets and the utilities within this defined area. But by having the developer legally take them over, they're sidestepping that cost. So there's a huge benefit for the city. And once more and more cities realized, oh my God, we can save a lot of money, this helps the bottom line, there became very aggressive incentive programs for developers, and developers, of course, liked it. So all of a sudden, you saw this huge wave of associations come into play. So they start with the developer, though. Let's articulate it as the origin. The developer elects to create an association or a planned community. That's the start.
Okay. So, but that, it doesn't mean that necessarily that's a bad thing, right?
No, not at all.
I guess I think anyone that's actually listened to the show knows that not against HOAs. In fact, you yourself live in an HOA.
Yeah, and I'll be clear, I'm against bad HOAs.
Yeah. Yep.
And some people will come over and they're like, "Oh, you're the guy who hates HOAs." No, I hate bad HOAs.
Yeah.
There's a huge distinction there.
Yeah.
Because when an HOA is functioning, it has tremendous utility, or it can, right? It stabilizes fair market value of the homes. There's consistency within the development itself. You're not in a situation where you run into Christmas decorations in June.
Yeah.
Some people like that. I personally like that. I don't want to see holiday decorations in summer, right?
Well, if you look at it too, just from an aesthetic standpoint, your neighborhood is, for the most part, always going to be nice.
In theory,
right?
yes, it should be.
Yeah, it should be.
There's harmony within the community.
Right. And which makes a more pleasant living arrangement. And you typically get the little parks and maybe some green belts and some pools,
Right.
depending on the situation. And sometimes that could be a better living situation for yourself. And to your point, fair market value.
Well, it's an investment, right? Most individuals, their home is the biggest investment.
Yeah.
It's their biggest asset. So in theory, the association is a way to protect it. Now, on our side of things, bad HOAs, they're attacking or they're undercutting the fair market value. That's problematic, obviously, right? But when you come to a very well functioning HOA, it very well could and likely it typically does protect the fair market value.
Can I ask a question that I don't think I've ever asked it?
Okay,
And
go ahead.
I know you get nervous on that
I don't
one.
get nervous. It's very hard to get me nervous
yeah.
nowadays, but
Okay.
go ahead.
If you're buying a house in an HOA, or let's reverse it, you're selling a house in an
Okay.
HOA, and you are well aware of ongoing litigation within the community against the HOA, you have to disclose that?
So two things on that.
Okay.
Litigation is public record,
Okay.
right? So it's already out there.
Sure.
Now, it depends, I suppose, on what type of litigation is occurring.
Okay.
Right? Is it massive defects within the community? You know, in California, at least, I think the best rule of thumb is disclose as much as you can.
Yeah.
Better to disclose.
Yeah.
Because the consequences of failing to disclose are pretty drastic.
Okay.
Okay. So if you know about a problem, an existing problem that's impacting the property or the community,
Yeah.
probably better to disclose.
Okay.
So
Okay. I was just curious about that. If your HOA is a dumpster fire, to what extent you have to disclose?
I would disclose.
Okay.
Right. But again, it is public record if it's litigation. It wouldn't be public record if it's arbitration, but a lot of these cases end up in state court anyway. So, all right. So going back to the development.
Yeah. Sorry about the tangent.
No, that's okay. It's a good question though.
Yeah.
Looking at a development. So what happens though is developer comes in and what happens is they start to articulate design codes and they start to really look at the community as a whole. And that's where you start to get your CC&Rs, your governing documents, the standards, right? The rules, the regulations are really drafted at that initial phase.
Are they typically get drafted by another attorney? I'm sure there's attorneys and developers. They go lockstep and they kind of have boilerplate that kind of starts off and then
they do. They typically have a base.
Okay.
Right. But then that base is going to be changed based upon the aesthetic of the community, what they have. Do they have tennis courts? Do they have swimming pools? Do they have pickleball courts?
Yeah.
Right. And so the developer is really charged with developing the rules, the foundational covenants of that community. And that's really the starting point of an association. If you look at the association too, you know, what is it at the end of the day? It's a community that has its own sort of governance. It has its own ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is the origin of these communities.
Is the developer.
Yes.
Developer is incentivized typically by
the city. And the city likes it because it's deferring or offsetting costs.
Yeah. They set up a standard. The builders create the CC&Rs.
They're lawyers.
Yeah,
the
the
developers do.
And then so who is on the initial board?
So that's a good question. So typically what you see is the developer sort of controls everything, okay? And there is often a legal entity that's formed, typically a corporation, different types of corporations.
Yeah.
Registered with if it's California, the California Secretary of State, okay?
Yeah.
But what happens though is they develop these homes and people start to buy.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to fill the community, right, with residents. Eventually, the developer turns over that entity to the homeowners. Because at the end of the day, the developer isn't in the business of running and overseeing a community.
Sure.
Right? They want to make their money and they sort of want that clean exit at some point. So the obligations, the fiduciary obligations are eventually transferred over to the first board. And that board now steps into the entity, and that is where the board really has its origin, or at least the board part of it.
Sure.
Homeowner-driven board.
In broad strokes, when after the community is all the final lot has been sold and the community is well established, how long before, I mean, in typical terms, does a property, the developer, turn over the keys to the kingdom to the board?
It depends. Sometimes it doesn't have to be fully sold out.
Oh, okay.
Sort of sometimes in the early phases of property acquisition, right? You have a handful of homeowners who are already in there. It might be turned over at that point. It just depends. I've seen it cut a number of different ways.
Okay. There's no set of rules. Okay.
No.
All right.
Generally speaking, no.
Generally speaking.
Yeah. So it gets turned over to the homeowners or to the first board.
Yeah.
And now that board is really charged with executing on those CC&Rs and governing documents.
They're already established.
They're established, but now they're empowered to take it over.
And the bylaws too are already set as well.
Yeah. Bylaws, CC&Rs, rules and regs. Typically, there's sort of this document suite that happens.
Yeah.
And they step into it. And what happens there is contractual obligations start to form, fiduciary obligations are formed. So the new board is really stepping into a very legally, heightened environment.
Yeah.
They went from normal homeowner to now being on the board, which has contractual obligations, fiduciary obligations. And it's really something, and I've said this before, not something to be taken lightly.
Sure.
It's a very serious role right out of the gate.
Yeah.
And I think that's some of the biggest problems we see is the failure to understand how important that role is.
And they have to follow the rules, which is a good, I think, transition to the layer of the law, right? Because I think a lot of people get mixed up with, the CC&Rs versus local laws versus state law versus federal law. So there is a hierarchy.
There is. And what's interesting is you see developers who have developed associations, air communities, right, plan communities, and they have initial set of CC&Rs. And that was 30 years ago. And those CC&Rs are still what are in play because the board is never updated, et cetera. So what happens, though, is if there's a contradiction between those governing documents and state law, for example, Davis Sterling in California, Davis Sterling is going to override the CC&Rs.
Yeah,
right? That's the controlling law.
Sure.
So state will control over CC&Rs if there's a conflict.
And we've seen this play out, and we've talked a little bit about this. A couple of examples would be solar. 30 years ago, there was no such thing as solar.
Correct.
And then California is really trying to incentivize solar.
Right.
So the laws make it easier to get solar. And same thing with drought-tolerant plants.
That was the other example I was going to use.
Yeah.
Because things change, priorities change within the state, and the CC&Rs don't always keep up with that.
Sure.
So what you're going to do, and what happened, for example, with the drought situation.
Yeah.
Homeowners were converting their lawns. They were saying, you know what, I don't want this grass in my front yard. I'm going to turn it over to a desert scape.
Yep.
And the HOAs were throwing a fit. They were very upset. They're like, you can't do it. It's inconsistent with the CC&Rs. But the fight back was state law.
Yeah.
State law allowed for that. And so that overrode the association's objection.
Yeah. So they try to enforce on it, but then it's out of step with the law. And therefore, the hierarchy, state law now takes precedent. So those CC&Rs cannot be enforced.
And then, of course, on top of that, you have federal.
Yeah.
So that would be the hierarchy, and that's really how you have to really conceptualize, the legal obligations within the community, or the legal hierarchy, if you will. Yeah.
So getting back to, realistically, when these are handed over to, in a good situation, because I'm sure you've seen some very poorly run HOAs that are under control by the developer. So let me rephrase that. I'm sure you've seen a lot of bad HOAs that are under control of the developer and have not been passed long. And you see that comes up frequently?
Relatively frequently. A lot of times in condo buildings, because a lot of the communities in California, at least HOAs, are pretty well established. Now there's new development all the time, but a lot more condos go up more frequently. Smaller condos that are built. So we see a lot of it in the condo space, and the developers who do actually have a contractual obligation and a fiduciary obligation just dropping the ball. Their goal is to sell, get these things off their books, and at the same time, though, they're kind of tied into these communities where they have these obligations to uphold.
Yeah,
and so it can become a very frustrating situation for the new owners. Yeah, new owners step in, and there's problems, and they're going to the board, but the board is the developer, and it just becomes a very complicated situation if not approached correctly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen it where they try to the developers try to change the CC&Rs to get themselves out of a loophole?
I have not seen that. I would imagine my firm has seen that before, not firsthand though.
Yeah.
But again, I think it all goes at the end of the day. The biggest problems with these HOAs, the bad HOAs that we harp upon, is just not abiding by the contractual obligations that are in front of them. It's as simple as that. They have ulterior motives, or there is just an ignorance, right? And you always see this. It's, you look at the CC&Rs. CC&Rs are very clear. Davis-Sterling Act is very clear. Fiduciary obligation, right? Standard of care is very clear. And the individuals that step into these roles just don't care, or
ignorant.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think one of the biggest problems that we have.
Yeah.
Some of the reform efforts, if we're looking at that, how do you offset that? Right. And I think, part of what we've been talking about pretty consistently now is more draconian, or not to use the word draconian, but more punitive damages on the back end, really to heighten the level of liability. When someone steps in, has contractual obligations, and knowingly ignores those or weaponizes certain aspects of their position, I believe that that should be penalized heavily.
Yeah.
And I think it would offset that. I think it would discourage, bad members from joining in the first place.
We've also talked about like some degree of training or some sort of knowledge transfer that needs to happen. I mean, heck, you can't become a bank teller without getting some sort of training. And now you're in charge of this community, $1 million house. You got 100 houses in the community. You have a $100 million community
or more, because when you start taking in the common area.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So
$100 million worth of real estate, and you've never run a thing in your life. I mean, that's not disparaging. It's just saying that you're in charge of a huge amount of assets, having never run an organization potentially.
And your prime driver was you wanted to be with your buddy Bill. That's what inspired you.
You're thinking that, man, I'm going to be able to get these pool parties at the common pool and be able to reserve it for myself.
Or exactly. It's some self-interested motivation.
Yeah.
And that just it has such a negative impact on a community.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think it's education, but I also think it's amplifying or increasing the liability on the back end.
Seems like in the first set, like when the developer turns it over that first board, it seems like it's kind of handed over on a silver platter. Everything's fresh, everything's new. You know what I mean? That this should be the layup that they
One
they
would
want.
think though.
Yeah.
Sometimes though that the initial CC&Rs are inadequate. There's problems there.
Interesting. Is that just because it's a little too boilerplate?
Maybe it's too boilerplate. It doesn't really jive with the community. I've seen CC&Rs that reference tennis courts, and there's no tennis courts. And if you really want to sort of go under the hood on that one, I mean, that's just sloppy lawyering, right?
Yeah.
But the developer probably wanted to do the legal on the cheap, right? So they cut corners on the legal, and now
grabbed it from their other developments.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or they did, a copy paste job that they forgot to, actually customize it to the community.
That's brutal.
It can be imperfect as well. And that causes obviously a ton of problems too. If the original set is imperfect, there's ambiguities that typically gives rise to legal situations or disputes.
Fun.
Yeah. So,
okay. I'm going to hit you with one I hear all the time.
All right. Hit me.
Every Reddit post, everyone that wants to know how to unwind these things. They always
how to dissolve.
Yeah, it's like, so we got the origin story, but so many people just say, I flat want out.
Right. So I'm going to answer this in two ways. One, I will say that yes, under the law, technically it's possible. From a practical standpoint,
you just saw a bunch of smiles on the other side of this.
Of the camera. And everyone's like, okay, good, and the notepads come out.
Now here comes the.
But I think logistically, I don't think I've ever seen it actually done. It is procedurally very, very complicated.
Yeah.
From a tactical level, from a logistics level, it's a nightmare, and the chance of success, I think, is very, very low. I just don't see it ever happening. We actually did write, though, a pretty extensive blog about it. I think it's on our website. So maybe what you could do is post on there, because I'm not going to go into all the detail. I don't want to be Debbie Downer on this.
Yeah, I'm sure we could do an entire episode just dedicated to this one topic,
Yes.
but it's a dense one.
Yeah, it's very dense. It's very procedurally driven. But at the end of the day, I think, yes, possible, practical, probably not. Very rare.
What is it? The too long didn't read?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
So it's theoretically possible, but practically
and again, we're talking about California.
Yeah,
maybe
sure.
it's possible somewhere else. I don't know. That's not my vein.
Well, we're
or my
talking about,
jurisdiction.
if you think about it, I'm just thinking about it from what we said earlier to, well, the roads are taken care of by the HOA and all this other stuff that the developers took over, and that's part of the HOA. And now you want to unwind all that. There's so many nuances there that make it so impractical.
And that's part of it too, right? I mean, look at what you're unwinding.
Yeah.
And look at how many people bought into it originally. It's all set up. The city's incentivized. I mean, there's so much infrastructure that's already around this, and you're trying to unwind all of that.
Yeah.
So just think of that.
Yeah. Pools.
Yeah.
It's quite a nightmare.
It's a to do, as maybe my mother would say.
So can be done, but
so
for all intents and purposes,
let's post that. Let's post a link.
Okay.
And so people can reference it and realize how much of a nightmare it can be.
Perfect.
Not to say they're wrong thinking about it, but I think maybe there's better ways to tackle a bad HOA.
Okay.
Than the nuclear option of dissolving it.
Yeah, because going back to the whole thing and saying that we're not anti-HOA, we're pro-HOA, we're anti-bad HOA.
Right.
If you get the ship in order, things should sail very nicely for a long period of time.
Instead of torpedoing your own ship, because that's what you're doing, right? Why don't we just try to patch it up? Why don't we try to fix it? Why don't we try to, like you said, get it in ship shape? That's better.
There's some serious maritime puns happening right now.
All right, Marty, what else do you have for us?
I think that pretty much
origin and dissolution.
We've covered the whole broad strokes.
The birth of the star to the collapse of the star.
Yeah, and I think for those that want to dive deeper, we've done episodes on the difference between CC&Rs and bylaws. There is a difference. Everyone gets that messed up. The difference between your HOA and your property management. We just dropped that episode.
That was a great one. I love that.
There's a huge difference there, and so many people get that messed up. And then, just general disputes that we have. So there's a lot of good content that we have out, specifically diving into the nuances of each of those things.
Yep.
As well as this blog post on, tearing your HOA apart.
It'll be fun reading. Light reading for the weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Marty, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for watching. Again, if you like the video, like it, subscribe, and leave comments. Again, we do look at the comments, and the comments do inspire us to make additional videos that really resonate with you guys. So thanks again for watching.
Yeah, if there's any particular thing that you have a burning question on, this is where we get a lot of our content from the comments and from posts in communities. So, yeah.
All right, let us know, and we'll see you next time.